Let's begin with why this city, why Marseille specifically?
Well, the Pope is having this 2-day visit to this French port city. And in August, he stressed that he's not going to France. He's going to Marseille to say that this is not an official state visit, but a visit specifically to this city because there's problems that concern him about what's happening in the Mediterranean. And he is very concerned about the exploitation of migrants by criminals. So really, he's going to be touching on the issue of immigration, what's happening at the Mediterranean. Let's not forget, back in 2013, when Pope Francis became the pontiff, his very first visit outside of Rome, outside of the Vatican, was to the island of Lampedusa. That is really very much been top of his agenda, the plight of migrants, of refugees, those who are underprivileged, those people who are facing great suffering. This is a topic that he's often returned to, and he's going to be doing that again to the visit to Marseille. And of course, it's very topical because just in this last week on the island of Lampedusa, we saw that massive surge of arrivals of migrants, an island of some 6,000 to 7,000 residents having to deal with some 8,000 or so migrant arrivals. We saw the problems that led to the situation on that island, and Pope Francis is hoping to highlight their plight in this visit. Now, he has in the past described the Mediterranean as Europe's biggest graveyard. Now, according to the International Organization of Migration, since 2014, they estimate more than 28,000 people have actually lost their lives or are missing because they have made that crossing across the Mediterranean to try to come to Europe.
And Seema, what has Europe's response been to this influx of migrant arrivals?
Well, I mean, the Pope has been very clear. He's calling for a common migration and asylum policy, that Europe has to be united in terms of how it's dealing with the situation. But that's not what we've been seeing in the last week with this surge of arrivals. Yes, they agree on the idea perhaps of protecting Europe's borders and preventing the boats from leaving their point when they leave North Africa to come to Europe, and perhaps policing the Mediterranean a little bit more there. There's some agreement among some nations, but we saw the French Interior Minister earlier this week talking about how France will not welcome the migrants from Lampedusa. It's one thing to talk about those who may be looking for asylum and how you're going to process them, but it's not about accepting all the migrants that come in. And the Italian Prime Minister herself trying to deal with this situation, talking about clamping down on the traffickers who are benefiting from these migrants making this journey. But there doesn't seem to be in practice. There's a lot of talk about working together, but in terms of practice and what we're seeing on the ground, we're not seeing very much unity in that regard.
And Seema, real quickly, what's the Pope's schedule for Marseille?
Well, he arrives in the port city. He will be leading a prayer in the city's basilica. He will also be going to have a moment of remembrance that will involve an interfaith meeting outside at the monument that the city has for sailors and migrants who are lost at sea. So he will be leading this interfaith gathering, if you like. And then he will also be attending the closing session of a Mediterranean meeting that's happening in the city over the last week, involving 70 bishops, activists, as well as members of other religions that are represented in the Mediterranean. And while it's not an official visit, he will be meeting the French President Emmanuel Macron while he's there, and he will also be leading a mass, a big mass that we expect some 100,000 people or so to attend, including the French president.
All right, Seema, thank you very much. Seema Gupta reporting.